everybody. Welcome to one of my favorite people in all of the Niners media world, Rich Madrid. He's a writer over at Niners Nation. I have all this stuff linked below. If you don't follow him on Twitter already, what are you doing? You're not a real Niners fan. Go make sure you do that right now. Make sure you go read all of his work over at Niners Nation. I know I've certainly learned a lot from it. Rich, I know you've been getting back into it right now. I see you've put out a few articles since July. Do you have anything coming up or anything that people should be looking forward to pretty soon?
Yeah, I'm currently working on a couple different pieces right now that I'm trying to get done by the end of the month. One is going to be on the run game adjustments that Shanahan made in 2020, and I've been kind of talking with Mike Person about this. He's someone that I got in touch with recently to talk about a few other things, and he's just a cool guy to pick the brain of. You know, he played several years in that system with Shanahan in Atlanta and then with the 49ers for a couple of years. So he's got some really good insight on a few things. So I'm hoping to get all that stuff done soon. And then I'm working on a piece about where Trey Lance kind of fits in with the offense right now, because it's not really clear. You know, I mean, I think right now it's probably going to be Jimmy, the week one starter. So where does Trey Lance fit in coming in certain situations, certain package plays, you know, zone read, things like that? What are they going to do with him in the red zone? So I dug deep into the North Dakota State film and some of the 2012 Shanahan offense stuff with RG3. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of that stuff in just some package plays.
And that's really exciting to hear, honestly, because I feel like with Trey Lance, you know, you got to go and look at that North Dakota State and try and understand how that's going to translate, especially with Robert Griffin III kind of being the only data point you can really point to in terms of that dual threat quarterback with the Shanahan offense. So I'm certainly very excited for that. Everyone else should be looking out for that. And that's going to definitely tie into what we're going to touch on today for sure with Trey Lance. We'll talk a little Trey Lance today, but the first thing I wanted to talk about with you, Rich, and one of the topics I'm really interested in for this season, I've heard you talk about this a little bit with Grant before. I'm just interested to see where you are at now. With the 49ers offensive line this season, they made changes for sure. They added Alex Mack. They drafted Aaron Banks. How improved will the 49ers offensive line be as a collective unit?
I think pretty well improved. Just the addition of Alex Mack, even if they hadn't drafted Banks or anything, I think they would have been a solid unit right away. You know, you're getting Alex Mack, who already has familiarity with the system. He's one of the elite linemen in the league. And he really is going to be the glue that holds them together. You know, you can go back and watch any of this film where he's operating in the offense. And after Shanahan left the Falcons, he was playing in a similar system with Steve Sarkisian, who kind of kept a blend of his offense and Shanahan's together. And then, you know, with Dirk Cutter, they were kind of running similar concepts, similar calls, similar protections. You know, some of the West Coast guys and their jet protections and things like that. So he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's looking at. He's going to get the other four offensive linemen in the right position. He's basically going to be calling out who they need to block. You know, when you watch him on tape, he's a very animated player pre-snap. 95% of the time, he's pointing at two or three different guys they need to slide to protect or need to watch out for. So he is going to be he's a huge addition. I think he was probably their best offseason grab other than re-signing Trent Williams, but his role can't be understated.
Yeah, and I guess my one question with Alex Mack is, you know, he is getting up there in age a little bit. Did you sense any or see any regression with him in terms of the last few years?
No, I mean, pass blocking reps, you know, there were kind of a few questionable reps last season, but for the most part, he still moves well in space, and he still looks like a guy who's very capable of anchoring the center of that line. Like I said, what you're getting with him, you know, even if he's, you know, average to good with pass blocking, he's going to give you a lot in the run game, and he's going to get you in the right protections and blocking schemes pre-snap. So there's nothing, I don't really see any reason for concern with his age. You know, offensive linemen are playing a lot longer these days than most positions. You know, Andrew Whitworth is playing, he's close to 40, and there's a lot of other guys who are top NFL linemen that are, you know, after 35 plus right now. So I don't think that's really a big issue. And he had a stellar year last year. I think he only gave up 17 pressures in the games that he played, and he had some really good games in the running game, especially in the run blocking. So there's not really anything to worry about. I really think he upgrades that line, and it can't be understated. It's going to be a huge jump.
I agree with that point specifically. That I think it can't be understated because there was so much inconsistency at that position, especially last year in specific. But
Yeah.
with Kyle's offense, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I was hoping you could explain it a little more. How important is that center position in Kyle's offense, and why do you think it is when people bring this up, when they talk about Alex Mack? Why is it such a big difference to have a guy who's so smart at that position?
Well, the two positions outside of quarterback in Shanahan's offense that are most important are the tackles and the center. Guards are plug and play basically for them, and they didn't have a huge drop off at guard last year. There was a few guys that slotted in there that did just fine. They did give up quite a few pressures on the interior overall, but I think a lot of that was due to the center play. They had 3 or 4 guys that took snaps at center the entire season last year, which isn't good. They started out with Grossu. I think Garland came back before he got hurt again. And then a couple other guys. I think Brunskill got in some snaps in there at center. It just wasn't good. You can't have that many guys playing the same position. You got to have one guy that's going to anchor it all, and you got to have a quality backup. So I think if Alex Mack stays healthy, then they're going to vastly improve in that area. And so for the center in Shanahan's offense, and it's the center in any offense really, they're tasked with, outside of the quarterback, getting the guys in the right blocking protection, whether he's pointing out the mic. So he has to identify all the fronts right away, and he's going to be the guy pointing out. You may see him point out the mic, and they're really pointing out who they identify as the mic, not the traditional mic. And that's where the strength of the defense is going to be, and where they can expect the rush to come from, and who they need to slide to protect. And he's very smart. Like I said, if you go back, just even watch last season, how animated he is. He really does a lot of the dirty work for the offensive line up front.
Yeah, and I'm glad you explained that. And you touched on the guards just a minute ago. I do want to ask you about Aaron Banks, and I guess in specific with Aaron Banks. I know offensive linemen in general, it is harder to adjust to the NFL level with there being less reps, especially with the new CBA, everything that they've instituted. But I guess my question for you is that do you have any worry about the fact that right now Aaron Banks isn't that first team starter, or do you think it's something that over time it's just gonna whatever is gonna happen is gonna happen at that position? Because I think right now they have Brunskill and McKivitz slotted in that spot, and they've been kind of going in between them for the last for training camp at least.
Yeah, I thought Banks would come in and compete a little bit better than he was. I really liked his tape coming out of Notre Dame after they drafted him. I'll caveat this with I didn't spend too much time watching anybody in the draft outside of the top 5 quarterbacks. I just didn't have a lot of time. So typically what I do is I wait till, after draft weekend to see who they've picked, and then I go to the film and watch it. And that night I started watching Banks after they drafted him, and I really liked his tape. I spent a couple of days watching it. I didn't, I thought he was a really good pass protector. I thought he moved well in space. He probably fits a little bit more of a gap scheme running system instead of a zone blocking scheme. But he still has all of the traits they're looking for as somebody who can move well in space, get out on the edge and block some of those edge defenders in the zone and get up to the second level. So it's kind of curious to see what is going on with him in camp. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of good things. I don't think anybody has, but we'll see when this Saturday rolls around and what kind of reps he gets and how he looks. But I don't think it's easy for a lineman coming in right away as a rookie in this system. Even McGlinchey is somebody who's struggled in pass blocking. Why he struggles outside of his height and weight is anybody's mystery, and maybe he just always struggled in pass blocking. He's certainly a much better run blocker than he is anything else. And I think that's why they drafted him back in 2018 or whatever. But I don't think it's as easy as it is for some other positions in that offense. There's there are 2018 installs floating around somewhere. If somebody can get a hold of a copy of it, you can look at it and see 25 pages, 30 pages of defensive fronts in that book alone, and that's just an OTA's install. Who knows what it looks like for a regular season playbook. So there's so many things they have to learn with calls and protections and things like that. One of the things I talked to Mike Person about actually recently was that you can kind of get into a rhythm as the season goes on with what your assignments are, because for a lot of plays, they don't really change that much. But for a rookie coming in, it's overwhelming having, flipping through all those pages and seeing what they're responsible for. So when he distilled it down that way to me, it was kind of eye-opening. Like, okay, so at some point, somebody like Aaron Banks should understand that, hey, on these 15 plays, my responsibility doesn't change if I see this guy here. So, it may take him some time to get there. I don't know how complex Notre Dame's playbook is. I don't know how much, they really work with the linemen and things like that. They have a limited schedule in college to cover all that. So who knows? But, he was a second-round pick. He wasn't a first-round guy, or second or third round. I don't remember. But I think he'll get there. Right now coming in, it's got to be tough.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, with the Shanahan scheme in specific, like I mentioned all this stuff about how in general it's just become tougher for offensive linemen to adjust to the league. But like you mentioned with Mike Person with the installations, I'm sure it's a lot for any incoming rookie, especially offensive linemen. So I definitely hear you on that for sure. I guess the last thing I want to touch on with Aaron Banks is, what would you want to see out of him in preseason that would maybe give you a little more optimism?
Well, it's like any guy right now, really, right? You want to see, even Jimmy on down, you want to see how these guys handle their assignments. If they're making, I don't know if you can say making the right reads is the right phrase, but because you can only see so much in the broadcast, but you want to see, someone like Aaron Banks, you want to see him get off the ball at the snap. You want to see his footwork, whichever direction the play goes. If he's blocking someone in the zone scheme in the outside zone, you want to see him get to that blocker or that defender quick and get his head to the outside. And he struggled with that a little bit in college. He could, against some of those lesser teams that they faced at Notre Dame, I mean, he could have a really bad rep and still outmuscle the guy he's going against. So he has the play strength, but in the NFL, it's going to be harder to do that to someone like Aaron Donald or some of the other premier defensive linemen they're going to face. And that's one thing he struggled with was, in the outside zone, they teach the guys, get your head to the outside shoulder and get outside of him and either run him out or wall him off. And he struggles doing that against lesser defensive linemen. And so I think it is a footwork thing. And so I'm interested to see how that's going to play out if they've cleaned some of that up. He's not getting reps with the first team, so I don't think he's cleaned it up yet, but we'll see. But those are some of the things, like for Aaron Banks, what I'm looking for is footwork, hand placement in his blocks, and then head to the right side of whichever side they're running the ball.
Yeah, and we were just talking about Aaron Banks, how he's going to look in preseason, what we can expect from him. But I mean, this is a 49ers show. We got to talk about the most popular man in the 49ers, world right now, Trey Lance. I wrote an article about a week plus ago now about just how efficient Kyle's offenses have been when he's had that dual threat element, when he's been really effective in the red zone. In fact, his best 3 seasons were this past season, funnily enough, but then, of course, the 2016 Falcons and the 2012 Washington football team. So I'm interested to hear from you. What do you think Trey Lance can do to elevate Kyle Shanahan's offense and take it to the next level?
Well, just right away, even without the running ability I'd say running ability, and what I mean by that is running the zone read and all the quarterback running plays. Just right away, what he gives you is somebody who can push the ball downfield effortlessly. You see some of these throws in camp, and they're coming against the twos, and they're not facing a a ton of contact and things like that. He is still getting pressure because I think the backups on the 49ers defensive line are really good.
Yeah.
But you're looking at a guy who you hear every day. It's just like, okay, when am I going to hear about the next Trey Lance deep ball, perfect, accurately placed pass? You don't really get that with Jimmy. You don't get it in games. You don't get it in practice. And so right there, you're getting a guy who comes in right away and pushes the ball downfield. When you watch his North Dakota State tape, he wants to take that shot. When it's built into the play, he's going to look for it. And that's what Shanahan wants. He's looking for his quarterbacks to take that shot when it's there. There's even with Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. I think Beathard took a few more of those, but he was hesitant a lot of the times too when he saw it. And those plays are there. They call them. They just, the quarterbacks don't throw them. And it's certainly throwing deep is not one of Jimmy's strengths. He just doesn't have the arm for it to push it downfield. They threw downfield with Jimmy 20-plus yards in 2019, I think 32 times, was 29th in the league in attempts at that, and he completed half of them, but, they were wide open. So he just doesn't have the arm for it. You get Russell Wilson, or even someone like Kirk Cousins, who had twice as many deep ball attempts and finished above Jimmy in accuracy and completion percentage downfield in 2019 too. So he wants a quarterback that's going to take those shots when he schemes them up, and not just the ones that are wide open.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, just based off that, I think the really exciting difference, especially from Jimmy Garoppolo, is there's going to be a lot more explosive plays in this offense, right? And I guess with those explosive plays, how do you think that's going to make the rest of the offense easier because we know how much of a wizard Kyle is. Everyone talks about the Jimmy gimmies. We see, the intermediate throws with that deep threat, with Trey pushing the ball down the field and those explosive plays. How much stress is that going to cause for the defensive coordinators who are already stressed enough facing Kyle Shanahan?
It's going to put them under a little bit more stress. When you have a quarterback that can regularly push the ball downfield with ease like that and complete those passes, hopefully. And obviously we won't know until we see it in a game. Once he gets that timing down with the receivers, then you start getting defenses that back off, and then you can start running your outside zone read with him and things like that. And you can really dictate the tempo and control the game flow at that point with your script. So he really has been looking for this in a quarterback since Matt Ryan, and he hasn't had it. He passed on it. He had his chance in 2017 to draft Watson or Mahomes, and obviously hindsight being what it is now, you don't know if Watson would have lasted any further than a rookie contract. But he had a chance with Mahomes. He had a chance with Allen. They didn't have to give Garoppolo that contract to keep him around. They were certainly in a position to take Josh Allen, who was somebody that he had his eye on. They all the quarterbacks that they were named to be going after this offseason are all quarterbacks that have really good arms. Even Tom Brady last year. Tom Brady has a better arm than Garoppolo, and he's 44. So that Shanahan wants that added element of throwing the ball downfield. He wants to do that. He doesn't scheme these shots up for no reason. He wants it. He puts them there because he wants the quarterbacks to take that chance.
Yeah, and with the run game in specific, you talked a little bit about the zone read, and just in recent with Kyle's offense, it seems like it's a lot more motion, a lot more looks where the defensive coordinators' defenses, when they're facing him, they can't tell what's going on, whether it's a run or a pass. Now, when you insert Trey Lance into that just adds another dynamic on top of everything that is already so stressful about facing Kyle. So with that kind of ability of where teams are always trying to guess what Kyle's doing, I think Trey Lance is only going to bring that up to another level. So do you think it's something where this is kind of the perfect fit for Kyle, and this is really his ideal type of quarterback?
I think his ideal type of quarterback is just the one who's going to take those chances from the pocket. Yes, having the running ability is great, and it adds an extra element. And Trey Lance is a quarterback that's by all appearances, as big as Cam Newton, and probably will add a few more pounds, as the years go by here because he's so young. I don't think they went after Lance because he has that skill set in particular. Although, quarterbacks like him now that are coming out, and that's the same for Justin Fields. That's the same for even Zach Wilson has the athletic ability to move around and buy time. I mean, that's really what you're after. You're not after a guy who can come in and execute a perfect zone read or triple option pitch, every 5 plays or whatever. You're looking for a guy that can sit back in the pocket and who has that second reaction ability to move around and find guys off script. And, the top 4 quarterbacks in the draft have that. Lawrence has that ability. Wilson has that ability. Lance, Fields, whatever, Mac Jones, whatever you feel about him, he just doesn't have that skill set. And that's what the NFL, that's what teams are looking for now, because defenses are getting faster, and by some accounts smaller and more quick, and they're able to get after the quarterbacks with much more ease than they were 10 years ago. And, it's coming at a premium now, where if you don't have a guy like that can move off script and make plays outside of Tom Brady, you're not going to win very many games, in the next 5-6 years. So they had to do something with this position. But if Garoppolo could sit back there and dissect a team with his arm, they wouldn't have moved on. Like, he just can't do it. I mean, half of it is injuries and half of it is performance, and he just doesn't have what Lance gives you on day one.
Yeah, and like you touched on earlier, like with Lance's ability to push the ball down the field, that's just something we haven't seen from Jimmy Garoppolo. And with his injuries, it's hampered it even more. And specifically, I go back to that Week 1 game versus Arizona, where it just felt like they were daring Jimmy to throw outside the numbers the entire game. And you can only take it so far with a guy like Jimmy, especially with his loss of confidence really over the last few years.
Yeah, with Jimmy, you can see it in how teams started playing him in the second half of 2019 as well. They just drop to the middle of the field. You make your defensive scheme simpler. It makes it harder for the quarterback to do what he does best, and that's throw it over the middle of the field, and that's what Jimmy's really good at. But, in Week 1, Arizona just spot drops, cover 2, cover 3 in the middle of the field, and Jimmy has to throw outside the numbers. And it doesn't work. And sometimes he can get that throw, but the timing has to be there. The throw has to be perfect, and a lot of times it's not. And they still had a chance to win that game. But again, you scheme up a deep shot for Kendrick Bourne, who beats Patrick Peterson on a double move and is wide open running into the end zone, and Jimmy threw it and hit Patrick Peterson in the back of the helmet. So I think that was it for them. I think the mess ups in the Super Bowl, and then compounded by the Week 1 screw ups, I think Shanahan decided that was when he was going to go in a different direction. I mean, I've heard things maybe they were looking after 2018 too. I don't know. That's just things that I've heard, but nobody really knows. But you can kind of see the evolution of this relationship take a sharp turn after Week 1 in 2020.
Yeah, for sure. And with Trey Lance, we've been overtly positive with him so far, but I'm sure it is going to be adjustment for him at the NFL level. So in terms of what's going to be thrown at him, what do you think is going to be the biggest adjustment for Trey Lance year 1 as a rookie?
I think it's really going to be the game speed. Whatever you think of Trey Lance, if you love him, if you hate him, whatever, and there seems to be a smattering of comments in the comments section that love him or hate him, but you really want to see him, how he reacts to the game speed, even if it is against second teamers. We know he can carve up the 49ers second team defense. He's been doing it for 2 weeks now. How's he going to do it against the Chiefs second team defense? We don't know. We don't even know how the Chiefs are I don't think teams really game plan that much for preseason. I think you're really just out there to test your scheme and elements of your play calling and things like that, and communication and stuff like that. And you're really just evaluating players more than anything else. So we may see Trey go off, and we may see, oh shit, this is a little bit fast for him. Excuse my language, but I think there will be a little bit of an adjustment for him with the game speed on, being on TV under the lights again, and having that stuff thrown in his face. He's a guy that hasn't played in a year, and we don't know. I mean, things I'm really looking for at this point from him are how does he drop back, sit there and read the field after not playing for a year? He hasn't done any of that in a live game situation, and it'll be, he had the one game last season just because that was by default that Central Arkansas needed to get that game in, and North Dakota was able to get it on there. But, he hasn't played since 2019 really then. So the game speed's different at the FCS level than it is at the NFL. He is athletic enough that athleticism, I think, translates. So I think he'll be fine ultimately, but it's going to be different, man. He might go out there and struggle, early right away for, a series or two, and then until he gets comfortable with the flow of things. So I would expect them to probably lean heavy on the running game with him. Maybe a couple of zone reads, a couple of quick passes just to kind of get his feet wet. Outside of that, we really have no idea.
Yeah. And with him, in terms of the amount of passing and running you see him doing when he does eventually start, I guess I think the general consensus is that he'll probably run more early on, and then, as like you mentioned, the more comfortable he gets, the more and more he'll pass and the more attempts he'll get. So how do you see that kind of divvying up right now in terms of the amount of passes and rushes he'll have in a game, or at least design runs?
I think this is like any Shanahan preseason game. I think you're just going to see a lot of the base concepts from them. You're probably going to see a couple of play action rollouts. You're going to see a lot of early training camp install stuff running, their stick flat concept, probably double slants. They have a deeper curl route that they run off play action, which is basically like a read route at 20 yards. The receiver either sits down or takes off downfield. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of, concepts in there that you're used to seeing in games, just because it is preseason and they don't want to give too much away and how they're going to run certain things. So I would expect to see that from him, a lot of those base throws on those 3 and 5 step drop plays, and then probably, zone read. I mean, teams know zone read's coming from the 49ers again. Teams know how to defend it. And what you really don't know is how they're going to package it or dress it up. I've seen clips here and there from people that sent me stuff from practice. They're running it a variety of ways. So I didn't think there was many ways you could run it, but there is. Personnel packages, things like that are different. They change. They'll hide some of that stuff. I doubt we'll see a lot of the complicated stuff like that in preseason, but it's coming.
Yeah, and I think the one sort of, maybe not even criticism, but the thing maybe some people have seen in practice a little bit is, often when they talk about Jimmy, they say this is low. He kind of he won't get all of it underneath the throw. But with Lance, from what I've heard, it seems like if he misses, he tends to miss high when he does miss. So with that, what kind of a concern do you have about that? And then how do you think he's going to get better at that over time and be able to improve on that accuracy?
Well, we know with Jimmy, all his misses are typically low and behind, and that's typically a function of the quarterback's lower body. He's not really someone who steps into his throws. He doesn't put too much weight on the front foot, and then his back foot comes off the ground when he throws. And some of that is the new way quarterbacks are taught to throw, because when they progress through the ranks, or not the ranks, I guess, but the levels of competition, pass rushes get faster, so they have to learn to find ways to get rid of the ball quicker. And that's what Jimmy's very skilled at, is kind of generating the power from his upper body rotation on his throws. And that's what really lets him get the ball out quick. He doesn't necessarily have the arm strength to follow that, but that's kind of the way quarterbacks at some levels are taught now. Some quarterback coaches teach that. I've talked extensively with a quarterback coach about that. And I think that's how Jimmy was taught coming up through college and things like that. So, it hasn't really served him that well in the NFL. Now with Lance, this is a guy who had his mechanics broken down after 2019, basically from, the bottom up in the military. We used to call it breaking you down to zero and rebuilding you. And that's what they apparently did with Lance's mechanics. They threw out everything he knew and just forced him to fix a lot of the issues he had. One issue that causes him to miss high is because he's rushing the throw after he has the hip dip. And I've posted clips about this if you can't picture it, what I'm talking about. But basically on his windup, his hips sink and he pops up and throws. And this is apparent all over his college tape. When he doesn't throw like that, throws are much better. So it's something like just something as simple as that he needs to clean up. And it looked like he did in his pro days. And it doesn't look like he throws with that noticeable dip anymore. But in a game, quarterbacks are always going to revert back to what's comfortable for them. I mean, several years ago, I read something where Aaron Rodgers said, "I work on my footwork to improve it all offseason every year." And Aaron Rodgers doesn't have great footwork, but it shows you whatever they do to improve it in the offseason doesn't always translate over into games. I mean, Mahomes, God love him, and he's a great quarterback, and he's gonna be one of the best probably, but he looks like Krusty the Clown throwing some of these passes. Yeah. If you can picture the feet going every which way. For him, it works because he has the arm strength and he's a smart quarterback. For someone like Joe Flacco, who has the same footwork as Pat Mahomes on a lot of those throws, Joe Flacco fell off a cliff. It didn't work for him after a certain period of time. So who knows how his mechanics are going to affect him. It may not affect him at all. He may have just that much athleticism in games that it really doesn't matter. Or it may affect him big time when he tries to sit back there and dissect teams with his arm. But we just don't know. We need to see it.
For sure. And the last question I have about you or for you about Lance is in terms of, from all the practice reports I've seen, from everything I've been reading from the media, it seems like he's done a good job stepping up in the pocket and being a willing quarterback instead of, you think about Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, they tend to run backwards and fall back. Why is that going to be an advantage for Trey Lance specifically with his style that he plays with?
Because he is going to be a guy who's always going to look to throw first. He's going to exhaust all his options with his reads before he makes a decision to run. And even then, he's going to look to make a second reaction play. What I mean by a second reaction play is when a quarterback gets to the top of his drop and takes that first or second hitch and sees nobody open, the instinct for a lot of quarterbacks is to pull it and run. Lance doesn't do that. He will get to that second or third read. If nobody's open, he's going to look for space to make a throw. And whether that's stepping up into the pocket, finding a route out of the pocket, and he's going to keep his eyes downfield the whole time he does it because he wants that throw. He wants to push the ball downfield. And so you'll hear a lot about, scouts and people on TV and analysts and things like that say second reaction ability. That's what I mean by second reaction ability. And I think that's one of his greatest strengths outside of his arm strength. It's just that ability to improvise and make things happen. Shanahan likes to say, make me right when I'm wrong. That's what he's looking for in the quarterback to do. Make that off-script play. Buy yourself some time. And I'm not talking about the Russell Wilson style because Russell Wilson legitimately just doesn't see guys open over the middle of the field. That's just I don't know if that's something that Wilson's always struggled with, and maybe it is. It just was more apparent to me last season as I watched him a little closer. But the difference between second reaction ability is and what Wilson does is exhausting your options in your reads and then making a play. Wilson can do it, but oftentimes he's not seeing the guy wide open middle over the field or over the middle of the field or whatever. So. And then that's when he looks to leave the pocket and make a throw on the run. To me, true second reaction ability is exhausting all your options and then buying time to get off the throw.
For sure. And we just spent a lot of time on Trey Lance. I'm glad. I had a lot of questions about him. You answered a lot of the stuff I'd love to hear, and I hope 49ers fans are happy with what they've been hearing about Trey Lance so far. And I do want to move on to some other rookies next, in that they did take two corners this draft in the third round, the fifth round. Ambry Thomas, of course, I believe 102nd pick, and Diamador Lenore out of Oregon later on. First, I wanted to get some of your initial thoughts on these rookie corners, and then also, and we can get to this next, but the depth in general of the 49ers secondary, the corner spots, definitely it seems like it's a worry for fans. But let's start with Ambry Thomas first of all. What have you seen from Ambry Thomas?
I think he's solid. I think he would have been a guy who probably would have been a late round 1 pick if he had played in 2020, but he opted out due to COVID. But he's coming from Michigan. He played in Don Brown's mostly cover 1 scheme, man-to-man coverage all over the field. That's what Don Brown likes. And so he's really bringing that. I think it really kind of shows the direction the 49ers defense is going to go. And cover 1 is a really good coverage. It's simple, and you can do a lot of things underneath with the other defensive players if you have good guys that can cover. And so I think he's going to fit really, really well with what they're wanting to do. He's a rookie. He's had some missteps, and he's had a lot of really good reps in practice. And I think eventually he's going to slot in probably as the second corner. As far as Lenoir, I just haven't seen a lot. I think he has a lot of technique issues. And I'm not the best one to talk to about corners sometimes. I think you probably want to get Eric Crocker for that. But from what I've seen, I just think he leaves a lot on the field in his reps. He gives up too much ground, and even some of the man coverage press stuff that they do. And they frequently call it, opening the gate, where he'll turn the other way basically because he gets thrown off by whatever move the receiver does, and then that allows that receiver to just get wide open on him. So, in a lot of the reps you've seen, he's just getting abused by Sherfield and some of the other guys, trying to fight for a third and fourth receiver spot. So I don't have a lot of high hopes for him. But Ambry Thomas, I think, if he doesn't make the second corner spot, he can easily be someone that's going to slot in at the nickel or star defender or whatever they call it now.
Yeah, and that was my next question, because I think Emmanuel Moseley, obviously he had the COVID issue early on in training camp. He's back now. It seems like he's doing pretty well in camp. So if Ambry Thomas isn't able to beat him out and supplant him as that second cornerback, do you see them using, like you just mentioned, in nickel, and then eventually he'll go out to that outside corner?
Yeah, I think he'll get reps at corner and probably at nickel. Williams is back for one more year, but he's had a couple of injury issues the last couple of seasons.
Yeah,
you just don't know how reliable that's going to be. And I feel bad for the guy, because K'Wan Williams, to me, is one of the premier nickel defenders in the league. He's so good. You got to pay the guy money. But I don't know that he's going to be the guy going forward after this season. So somebody like Ambry Thomas could be that guy if they can somehow land another premier corner or hold on to Verrett and Moseley pans out next season. You have to find a way to get Ambry Thomas in there at some point.
Yeah, and then for the second part of this question, do you think the depth that people always talk about at the corner position, do you think it's kind of, it seems like it's the thing that 49ers fans have been bringing up all offseason. Do you think it's a little overblown?
Yes and no. Last season they played very well in the secondary, despite not having Tart for a majority of the season.
Sure.
And then at corner, with Sherman being out, they probably actually played a little better. And I love Richard Sherman, but he just didn't have, when he played last season, he just didn't have that step that he had, even in 2019. Teams just, for whatever, whenever he played, like even when he came back from injury late in the season last year, they just didn't target him. Why wouldn't you target the guy when he's at his weakest? But I think they got really good production out of Verrett, and they got really good production out of a Moseley-Witherspoon combination over there when those guys were in. I think those guys were fine. I think I would have liked them to keep Witherspoon. I thought he played great, especially toward the end of the year. But those are the things they have to weigh with the other guys they need to pay and what they value and don't value. So he was definitely a guy I thought they could have held on to, but Moseley is just fine. Moseley is a dog, man. He'll get in there and run with DK like he did in 2019 and be just fine. I think the secondary issues are a little, like I said, a little overblown. They just don't have a star player in there that you can point to and be like, that's the guy, we need to hold on to. They're kind of just who they are. And to his credit, Jason Verrett, to me, is a playing at an all-pro level when he's healthy. Even, the games he played before the 49ers when he was injured off and on, the games he did play, he was locking down everybody he played. And if he's someone that if he had stayed healthy his whole career, we'd be talking about him as the second or third best corner in the league. So he's awesome. I love Jason Verrett, and he can do it all. And I hope they find a way to keep that guy after free agency next season, because they need that guy. He was their most consistent corner last year, and he played great.
Yeah, and he's just such a great story too. Everything he's gone through, what he's coming back from, and especially hearing this offseason, it seems like he's as healthy as ever. He's been playing as well as they've seen him play in training camp, and I'm really excited to see Jason Verrett as that number one guy, especially next year. The next position, or before we get out of the secondary, actually, I did want to mention this in the comments. The 49ers signed Clinton-Dix earlier today. Adam Schefter announced. That seems like more of a response to the issues that they've had at that second safety spot with all the injuries with Jaquiski Tartt. I believe Tony Jefferson was even still dealing with injuries. So what do you think they can get out of Clinton-Dix? And how much playing time do you see him getting early on?
I think if Tartt can't go, I think him and Ward will be just fine. I think he's probably a little bit better than Tartt, and I love Tartt, but the injuries are just holding him back. He can cover, and we haven't had a true safety that could cover as well as Dix can. So, and I love Ward too, but Ward's strengths are not deep middle of the field. They're more sideline to sideline, intermediate area. And Tartt can run, but he's, they use their safeties interchangeably, so you never know if Tartt's going to be dropping deep or if he's going to be up in the box because of the way their defensive schemes are set up to rotate safeties based on passing strength and things like that. So having Dix back there, I think, does give them an advantage in the pass coverage area a little bit more than Tartt.
Yeah, and next, I want to talk about some of the guys we've been seeing go up against this secondary in specific. I want to talk about the guy who, I got to be honest, I'm trying to be an unbiased reporter, but he's my favorite player on the 49ers, Brandon Iuke. What do you, first of all, let's start with his rookie year. What do you think he can improve on from last season, and what do you think he can do to take that that next jump up in the NFL?
With him, it's tough to decipher sometimes because you have to kind of take into account who the quarterbacks were, outside of Garoppolo. He didn't really get a lot of time with Garoppolo, and the few throws that he did have weren't great. Garoppolo had the one deep shot where Iuke got wide open and Garoppolo threw him out of bounds after he caught it. So, I think he's going to be a guy who's going to have to fight to get yards after the catch and show that he can be that guy. He didn't have a lot of that opportunity last year. So, we know he can do it based on what we've seen in his college tape. But in the NFL, it's been tough because he hasn't had a quarterback that could place the ball in an area for him where he could catch and run. All the end arounds, things like that, that's all fun in the moment. But I want receivers, and I think Shanahan does too, and the fans should want this. You want guys that are going downfield as receivers. Save that other stuff for a rainy day when you need to pull it out of your bag and, not have your receivers running reverses and end arounds and tap pass fly out of the backfield, because you don't have a quarterback that can push the ball. So he really, hopefully, will be able to showcase some of that and find ways to get yards after the catch, after the quarterback throws him a good ball.
Yeah, and kind of the one thing when I did my film breakdown of Iuke about a month-ish ago now on my YouTube channel was that the one thing that really stood out was the ball placement and how tough it was and how just impressed I was with his ability to adjust in the air, his balance, his body control, that kind of stuff. Just watching this guy, like, man, if he just had a quarterback who could give him better ball placement.
You're watching this guy get open, and I think one of the best games to watch this is the Buffalo Bills Monday night game. I think he was going up against, who's Trey White.
Right. Yeah.
He abused Trey White on a few of those press releases. Iuke, he's just so skilled at getting open off the line. But then you get, throws where he does get open. The Jimmy throw in the New England game throws him out of bounds. The game again in the Saints, Mullen makes him dive for it. So he's just not getting a lot of those opportunities to be a receiver after the catch.
I think there was even that one from Seattle. It was like maybe a deep crossing route where it's pretty much a touchdown and Iuke has to adjust, and instead it's like a regular 25, 30-yard gain, and he just had to adjust on the fly and just to be able to get the ball. But if you look, he had open grass right in front of him, and if he just gotten it in stride, that's 6 points right there. So I feel like with the improvement, hopefully at the quarterback position, you hope both quarterbacks don't get hurt, right? But hopefully there is that level of improvement there where even if he is playing with Jimmy Garoppolo and it's not Trey Lance, that there's going to be more consistency, and it's not going to be such like you were saying, they don't have to manufacture touches for Iuke as much as they did last season, especially.
Yeah, I hope not. I don't want to see receivers taking a push pass out of the backfield, not with the quarterback they have. And even if Jimmy starts, man, like if he's having as great a camp or as good a camp as everyone says he is, I want to see him push the ball a little more down the field too. I mean, we need to see these things, especially from someone like Garoppolo. Otherwise, what's the point of him starting week 1? I mean, run Debo and Iuke downfield and let Garoppolo. Let's see if Garoppolo can do that. Stop getting the yardage on a pass play that should count as a run play.
Yeah, and with Iuke, I know he's gotten some lofty comparisons this offseason. Devontae Adams was one of the names people throwing out there, but I mean, that was kind of crazy, man.
Adams wasn't Adams in his second year. It took him a few years to get to where he's at now, and that was playing with Rodgers. So,
right.
If Iuke is like that in 3 or 4 seasons, and then great, that'd be awesome. If he's like that before then that's even better. But pump the brakes on these comparisons.
And I feel like Brandon Iuke is really his own unique type of receiver. I don't. Not that I hate comparisons in the NFL, but with some of these guys, it just becomes to the point where it's kind of moot at a certain level.
Yeah, it just gives people things to talk about and agree or disagree with. I mean, it's
right.
Whatever.
Yeah, and with Iuke, I mean, even outside the 49ers fan base, in the fantasy community, you see it. There's all these people have these rave reviews of Brandon Iuke. He's testing off the charts in all kinds of deep analytics and all that kind of stuff. So what do you think his ceiling is in terms of, you talked about him 2, 3, 4 years from now? How do you see Brandon Iuke developing over time? And when he does reach his peak, what do you see him, well, what do you see him as once he does reach his ceiling? What kind of level do you see Brandon Iuke at?
I think he's easily a guy that can hit 1,000 yards every season with competent quarterback play. However they manufacture that, it is what it is. But he's definitely a guy who over 17 games should be well above 1,000 yards if he is what they think he is. I mean, so far right now, with his release off the line of scrimmage and his ability to track balls and catch everything in his huge catch radius, I don't see any issue with that going forward. There should be no excuse for a dip in production from that guy. He should easily get there every year.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think, like I said earlier, he's one of my favorite players. I just love watching him all the time. And I want to give a shout out to you because I was starting to get into all 22 film over the offseason, and then NFL just shut all that down. And if you go to the top of your pinned tweets, you can go and find all the 49ers games from last season. And you can go and watch.
While you can.
Yeah, get it while you can. I mean, jeez, Game Passes.
That's a whole other show.
Dude, we could do 2 hours on how much Game Pass is frustrating, but I do want to get to the last topic. And before we get out of here, I think, the defensive line to me is really intriguing this season, especially with all the depth the 49ers have collected. So I guess in comparison to that 2019 group where it might have been a little more top heavy, even though it is still a very deep group, I mean, all the reports from camp this year are rave reviews about the defensive line and how deep they are, and how, in fact, it's going to get to the point where they're going to have to cut a lot of guys who could be starters potentially or play on other teams. So in terms of philosophy wise, do you think it's better to have a deeper defensive line like they have this season, or, more of what they had in 2019 with the 4 great players on the defensive line?
Well, I think 2019 showed us that they need to have the depth. And I think if you can get the depth there, you need to have it, because it's a lot easier to find guys that can rush the quarterback than it is to find guys that can cover on the back end. Yeah. And if you have a solid core group of guys, you got the 4 starters and then probably 4 or 5 backups, it'll make the guys' jobs on the back end much easier. And then that's not to say the guys on the back end aren't good, because last season the defensive line took a hit, with all the injuries and things like that, and the pass rush, and outside of a couple of games like against the Bills and the Packers, the 49ers weren't giving up a lot of ground to opposing teams in the passing game, and they were still a really good coverage unit. And they were a top 6. They were the number 6 defense ranked by Football Outsiders in their efficiency metrics. So with all the injuries, they fell from 2 to 6. So there's no reason that unit can't be a top 5 this year, or that defensive unit, and that's going to come on the backs of the defensive line and the depth they have right now, because they don't really have the depth anywhere else. But you have to kind of take a step back and look and say, well, that could still be a strength, but the defense could still struggle with the new defensive coordinator and new scheme. So it's going to be even more dependent on those guys up front playing to the best of their ability. And then, if you have Bosa, Armstead, DJ Jones, and Javon Kinlaw as your starting 4, then you get Ebukam and Ford in there as rotational players. Or if Ebukam starts, we don't know. I mean, that's a lot of depth right there with just, the 6 names I listed, and that's not even accounting for Hurst and, DJ Jones. Or DJ Jones is going to be a starter probably, but some of the other guys, I can't remember their names.
Like Kevin Givens, right? Like
Givens,
they added Zach Kerr.
A lot of these guys would be starters on 15 other teams. So, and they're going to fight for reps with the 49ers. And that's always a good thing to have. That was one of the staples of the Harbaugh years, was having all these guys that were just, guys who rotated in throughout the game that went on, after their 49ers careers with Harbaugh and Fangio, went to be starters on other teams, some of the linebackers, I can't remember. He got in trouble with the law too. I don't remember his name, but Will Hoyt went and started a few other teams. A couple of the other guys did too. So they're definitely guys who could be solid starting contributors on other teams, and they're going to be guys who get, maybe 10, 11 reps a game with the 49ers. So it's with the ones that do stay. So it's going to be tough, and that's indicative of a solid depth core group of guys that they have, the solid depth all around.
Yeah, and I think the excitement from 49ers fans, like you've been kind of explaining this whole time, is they'll be able to kind of bring guys in waves. They don't have to rely on certain guys over others, and they can play matchups when they want to, but then they can also just overwhelm offensive lines by keeping in fresh guys all the time. And I feel like that's going to be one of the biggest advantages of this football team. And like you mentioned, for D'Amico Ryans, it's certainly, he's a new defensive coordinator, but having that type of defensive line and having that kind of pressure in your first year as a defensive coordinator certainly helps a lot, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're going to get out of here on that one, everyone. If you haven't, like I said, checked out all of Rich Madrid's stuff before, go read all that content. I've been really enjoying your breakdown from Trey Lance, especially. I've been learning a lot from that. So I encourage everyone to go read that. It's all in the description below. And look out for what you have coming in the future. Like you mentioned, you have that piece coming up on what the packages are going to look like for Trey Lance and the offensive line and all that great stuff. So thank you so much for coming on today, Rich. I really appreciate your time. This was so much fun. And like I said, everyone, if you're not following him on Twitter already, I don't know what you're doing. Go do that right now if you want to be as entertained as ever. Rich, thank you so much. This is a pleasure to have you on, and I'll certainly look forward to potentially having you on again. This is so much fun. So thank you for your time, and just on a last second before we get out of here, anything you want to mention, anything like that?
No, thanks for having me on, man. It's great. I love doing this. I love talking to people. It's a lot easier than talking on Twitter most of the time. So, yeah, man, the engagement looks great. People asking a lot of good questions and things like that. So if anyone has any other questions, feel free to tweet them at me online or whatever, and I'll do my best to respond. I'm at work till midnight usually every night. So I enjoyed being here. Love getting away to take the time and do this stuff for you guys.
Yeah, and thank you so much. Again, this is so much fun. For everybody, this is my last stream for a while. I'll be back in a little bit. I'll keep you guys all updated on that. But go to my Twitter, follow me. I'll keep you all updated on that. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great Wednesday night. This is the last night before preseason football. So look forward to that this weekend. It's going to be a great weekend of football. And thank you so much for stopping in, everybody.